Hi, I'm Garm and this is Midgardia's cool crowdfunding show. I'm here today with Spencer Campbell. How's it going?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about Slayers?
All right. Well, Slayers is a role playing game that I recently put up on Kickstarter. It's a game that has been probably a year in development on and off. It actually started with mechanics rather than like setting or anything like that. And actually had a number of different games that I was working on. And I wondered, what if I just glued them all together? And that kind of ultimately became what Slayers is.
Fair enough. So it's kind of a like urban fantasy monster hunting thing. Is that about right?
Yeah, so it takes place in a city that essentially spreads infinitely. It's an infinitely sprawling city, and you are monster hunters that are hired to go take on various beasts and creatures that lurk in the alleyways and the shadows of the city. And so the sort of cycle of play is every session is a hunt. You're given something to hunt. You all go investigate it, track it, research it, ultimately fight it and kill it, and then get paid.
The dream. I love getting paid personally. That's my
That's
favorite
right.
part. Yeah. Following the like rough arc of an episode of Supernatural when it was good.
Yeah.
Seasons 1 to 3.
Perfect. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. You got it.
So, one of the things that really caught my eye when I was going through the Kickstarter is the mention that each class plays entirely differently in terms of like game mechanics. Can you elaborate a little on that?
Yeah. So this came from my dissatisfaction with certain role playing games where everybody has the same combat resolution mechanic. So let's take D&D for example. The example I always talk about is a wizard is doing like physics reality bending magic, and a fighter is swinging this like magical insane deadly weapon. But ultimately, both players are going to sit down and roll a 20-sided die and add a modifier. Those two totally different actions are represented with the same dice roll, and that feels unsatisfying to me. I come from a board games background, and so in a lot of board games there's a really strong emphasis on asymmetry in play. My big inspiration is Root, where each player at the table is playing a wildly different game on the same map, all with the same goal of trying to get points. It's just each person gets points a different way. And so I wondered, could we do that with a role playing game? Could we take that idea of each player essentially playing their own version of the game cohesively, and so that you could really feel like whatever character or class it is that you're playing as?
Makes sense. So can you give us an example of how one of them works?
Sure. So the blade is a sword fighter, the more of a kind of a fast moving, stylish sword fighter rather than your typical like armor wearing knight or anything like that. And because it's this fast moving, stylish sword fighter, it's all about kind of combos. And what better way to represent combos with rolling dice than exploding dice? So you got exploding dice with the blade character, so that every time you roll a hit, which is a 4 plus on a dice on any dice that you're rolling, you're exploding and you're exploding, and so it just racks up this huge combo that will ultimately kind of like cut the monster down. You hit it 20 times before it even realizes what's happening to it, sort of feeling.
All right. So your the blade is more of a like samurai as opposed to like a classical European knight kind of thing going on.
Yeah, my big touchstone or inspiration is Dante from the Devil May Cry video game series. So it's all about racking up a huge like you get style scores in your combos and stuff like that. So I wanted that in my role playing game.
Ridiculously goofy one-liners are completely optional, I assume.
Yeah, but I feel like you should get bonus experience if you drop them.
Oh, absolutely. I've watched a buddy play through most of the Devil May Cry games, but I've never actually played them myself. They a little off topic, but what's your favorite Devil May Cry?
For me, so I'm of a similar place where I didn't play any of them up until 4. I never owned a PlayStation to play it on, so I would watch my cousin who lived nearby play the games. I think probably just the first one is my favorite because it was my first time I was introduced to this entire genre. And that alone just kind of blew me away. I didn't get to play a Devil May Cry game until 4 came out, which I know is that, that and 5 DMC are kind of more divisive versions of the game than the previous 3. But that's the first one I played. But I think 1 is just, that's where I fell in love with the idea.
That's fair. I was gonna say 2 is divisive, but I guess universally disliked isn't divisive.
Right.
And there's the American DMC, which we don't talk about. Uh,
No.
Not even a contender. Well, that's super cool. Uh, so how do the investigation mechanics work? Like that is a classic problem area for video
Mhm.
games. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So the way that I have the game kind of structured in the book, and I give an example adventure that you can follow, is it kind of follows a 3-act kind of flow to a session. Where the first act is highly investigatory. So you're being introduced to whatever it is that you're hunting. Um, the slayers themselves have skills that are obviously combat oriented, but there's also a number of skills that are related to hunting and learning. Everything from studying things, like actually like going into like a library and looking up histories or weaknesses of monsters, to almost like the equivalent of like street smarts, where you can get the kind of inside scoop from people who are being directly affected by whatever this monster is. And so a lot of it involves going in and like talking to people. A big part of the game is that each session takes place in a district, which are kind of like little microcosms. Each district is very different from the other. So the goal for the players is to realize what makes this monster thrive in this district. Why is it particularly dangerous here? And so part of that is just learning what this district is about. Who lives there? What are they like? One district is a highly vertical sort of place, and so you're going to get a very different monster there than a place that's kind of like all single story buildings with like a spiderweb alleyway system. So it's part of it is getting acclimated to where you're going to take place, the hunt is going to take place that night, and then meeting people and realizing how this monster is affecting them.
That's really interesting. Uh, I like that. That's super cool. Um,
Thank you.
so that brings us to the setting, I guess. Is there a default setting? Like, is it meant for a specific real world city, like Toronto, or
So
somewhere
it's
else?
it's it's called The City, because, and it's very specifically called out in the book that your city is going to be different than any others. The premise is it's an urban sprawl that takes that name quite literally. There's either a curse or some arcane drive that quite literally causes the borders of the city to constantly expand towards the horizon. So it's absorbing terrain and towns and everything like that as it expands. And so I give a few example locations and districts in the book, but I also say, where these are in your version of the city, they might be neighbors, they might be on opposite ends. Here are the tools that you can use to create your own districts. I want you to have this sense of it is a like truly a melting pot city, so that leaning into that investigation idea, you do go into a new district and you have to learn, like, what is the architecture like in this place, because that's going to change the way that we're going to fight the monsters here, as opposed to the last district we were in. So there's not necessarily like a set city, but it's just called The City because it's expanded on forever, that its history and its true name has been lost at this point. It's meaningless, and so people just call it The City.
I mean, you describe the endless sprawl as a supernatural curse, but that's just modern civil design philosophy, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's that too. So that leans, that's its own version of horror in the book.
Yeah, so we're talking something on the scale of like Mega City One from the Judge Dredd comics, or the Sprawl from the Sprawl trilogy by William Gibson, as opposed to like New York.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's just like, I mean, you won't find a border. You're just looking on and it's just a sea of different sporadic neighborhoods and things like that, just on and on and on.
Excellent. Or the city from Transmetropolitan. That's a good example as well. Um,
There we go.
uh, feel like I hadn't. Oh yeah, and the different architecture stuff kind of plays into the old you never see Spider-Man in the suburbs kind of thing, right? He would be
Yeah,
completely useless
yeah,
there. Yeah.
yes, precisely.
All
Yeah,
right.
those slinging powers would be kind of a. They wouldn't really do much out there.
They get you halfway past the house. Yep. Hooray.
Yeah.
Just call an Uber at that point.
Oh, I like that image. Spider-Man just on his phone, and it's like in Into the Spider-Verse when they take a bus out to the labs.
Man, I really need to watch that. I can't believe I haven't.
Def-
I found out
Definitely watch it.
I found out today it's the same directors as the old Clone High TV series. So like the fact that
Which I just learned is getting rebooted.
yeah, that's how I found out, and I am over the friggin' moon on that one, man. Clone High is. I shouldn't say it's a classic of my childhood because like I really was too young for that show,
Mm,
but man, a
I'm
lovely
so
show.
excited. My brother was excitedly texting me about it just hours before this, saying like, "Hey, remember Clone High? It's coming back."
Oh, I
Uh,
hope it's good.
I know, me too.
If not, we'll always have season one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, veering wildly back onto the topic of stabbing
Oh,
monsters in
right,
the
right.
face. What kind of tone are you going for in this game? Is it more comedic, more serious?
So it's definitely a darker tone, because you are hunting dangerous monsters and things like that. I have I've found that no matter what kind of tone I try and put into my games, uh, a table's gonna make it what they want to make it. I have different groups of friends that I play with, and some of them, no matter what I do, are gonna make it slapstick. Like there's just nothing I can do about it, no matter how I write the game. But the game specifically is written in such a way that it is kind of it's darker. It's this is a grim business that you're working with, and part of the art is going to reflect that as well. So the art up on the Kickstarter right now shows the Slayers themselves, and they're a bit brighter. They're a bit more colorful. They're the heroes, but the monster art that's being worked on right now is definitely it's darker, it's grittier. And so the book itself will show that sort of reflection of the two sides of what this city is kind of representing.
I really like the idea going with like two distinct art styles to represent the tonal elements of the setting. That's super cool.
Yeah, I'm excited just first of all to be able to highlight a bunch of different artists, but yeah, at the same time to really kind of drive home the point that these monsters are something that you should be worried about. Get an artist who's going to make that. These are the heroes. Get an artist who's going to show that.
Right. And the implied era of this is kind of modern day. Is that correct? Or like vague future?
It's actually more like industrial era, like industrial revolution era, almost like Victorian England, but like if you want a good touchstone, it's going to be like Dishonored, the video game, where there's in terms of architecture and culture, but also like there is like weird tech that doesn't feel appropriate for the timeline as well, that sort of thing. Like one of the classes, the Gunslinger, has a six-shooter revolver, which is for the time period of Slayers, advanced tech. Like nobody else has that kind of gun. Everybody else has the single shot, flintlock kind of pistols. But the Gunslinger's got this thing, and very specifically in the book says they're not going to tell you where they got it. They'll take that secret with them to the grave. So there is these weird blendings of timeline and tech, and that also will get emphasized by the districts, going back to that idea of each district being a unique place. Some districts might have a different sense of progression in terms of technology or the relationship between science and magic and things like that.
Right. You might stumble, through a place that looks like the main street of an old Wild West town with the saloon and the dirt road and some horses. Right beside that, you've got like a big Art Deco district with like all the fancy Bioshock-esque buildings.
Yes, exactly. You've got it.
I'm digging it. I'm digging it. And I'm never gonna think too much about how those two places interact. Although
Right.
I can definitely imagine the like border region where it like starts kind of shifting. You've got like
Yeah.
you got like the wooden structure with Art Deco detailing and stuff. Oh, that'd be sick.
Yeah. See, and that's a big thing that's in the book too, is that I don't want the GM or whoever's running the campaign to be the one that is the artist that creates the districts and everything like that. The book calls for you as a table to put this stuff together, to call out architecture, to call out clothing, to call out food that you see and smell while you're walking through the streets, so that you are really creating that district together. And exactly like you said, you can create, if you're like, all right, last session we were in this district, as we move over, what are we seeing that's hinting at the new district that we're moving towards? And you can kind of build that transition together.
Yeah, collaborative world building kicks ass. Like if you have a group that can really get into that improvisational stuff, and it's hard. I'm not gonna lie, it's not for everybody. But if you
Totally.
can, man, it really draws you deeper into that world. It takes a little bit of pressure off the DM and all that fun stuff.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. Especially if you have a group that's really into like historical clothing or architecture or whatnot.
Yeah, it helps that I have a lot of friends who are artists of various mediums, and so they've always got their own take. So all I have to do is give like a really loose structure, and they just fill it with color. And so I'm very lucky to have that kind of group of friends to work with that.
Yeah, I'm lucky that most of my friends are artists. I'm one of the few that isn't in our group. Uh,
Yep, same thing. I'm not the artist. I write things.
yeah,
They make the words look good.
I used to build like tabletop scenery. That's as close as I ever got, and it
Okay,
was it
yeah.
was not very good.
Yep.
Um, yeah. So what inspired you to make Slayers?
So I had basically two games that I was simultaneously working on that were not Slayers, that were not monster hunting games at all. That I liked the mechanic of what was going on, but I didn't really know what I was doing, or I didn't have a good enough like goal in mind to manifest them into real games. And they're represented in the Blade class and in the Gunslinger class in the Slayers book right now. So the Blade class was built off this sense of comboing, and I wanted to create almost like a sort of Street Fighter inspired role playing game. So it is this kind of like combo based system. So it was highly based off of exploding dice and people having different sized dice that exploded in different ways and activated different abilities. And you know, it got out of control as I was trying to map out all the different ways that, you could combo exploding dice of different size dice. And I was like, I don't really want to deal with this. I like the idea of combos from exploding dice. Let's simplify that. And same thing with the Gunslinger. The Gunslinger is a mechanic that I really like. It's like resource management. So you've got 6 bullets that you literally put like as a circle on 6 dice on your table there to show those are the bullets in your gun, and you're literally picking them up and rolling them, and reloading is putting those dice back down. And so I've been working on, and I'm still working on a kind of a Weird West themed game that is the core mechanic. But that one is so not ready yet. But I loved the mechanic so much that I kind of went, well, what if this was like a peanut butter and jelly situation? Can I combine these things? And what kind of setting would make sense to combine really different types of mechanics like that? And that's kind of when I started to put together this idea of like a crew that all have their own specialty. What kind of crew is there? And then, I made a game about robbing banks already. So I was like, well, I don't want to do another crime game yet. Well, what other things are there that have crews? And then I kind of landed on monster hunting.
Cool. Also, please come talk to me about the Weird West one when that
Yes.
comes around. You can see Sagas and Six Guns behind me for Savage Worlds. Uh,
Oh, nice.
it's a Norse, Old West game. I love that kind of stuff.
Ooh. Ooh, that sounds very cool.
It's really cool. I can shoot you a link to it later.
Please do.
I
Please
did
do.
I did an interview with the creator of it, Robert Bucky, a while back to show myself for a sec. Cool guy, cool game.
All right. I will
Yeah,
definitely check that out. That sounds amazing.
yeah, it's good. But yeah, no, this looks really cool. And like I said, just talking to you, I already have ideas for districts and stuff. And I see like a big Castlevania style art piece of it. It's just like, oh man, that's a good district.
Yeah, I actually just before I hopped on here was talking with another artist who's going to be doing some of the set pieces and talking with her about some of the example districts that are in the book and how to represent them in terms of some cool art that's going to be made up of them. So I'm hoping that the book is going to give you enough sort of inspirations of what I mean by a district and how diverse and different that they can be, and like really encouraging players to lean into that idea of like make the city your own, make it weird, like lead into the weird. That's what it needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's an important thing for people to think about on like a slightly more political note. I know I said this is the world's most softball interview, but like the concept of distinct neighborhoods is kind of dying out over time.
Mm.
And that's true on a larger scale as well, but just because of intercommunication and all that stuff, it's you don't really get distinct neighborhoods as well as much for both, which is both good and bad. But it's interesting to notice.
Yeah, yeah, there's absolutely parallels that you could. I live in Chicago, so I see that concept of distinct neighborhoods, but also seeing them die out and blend into each other and shift all the time. So I know exactly what you're going with there.
Yeah, it's a little bit less distinct up here in Canada, at least as far as I've seen. But I went down to Vegas 2 years ago, back when you could travel. Um,
Yeah.
and like you had the strip right beside, a bunch of like super poor, I was gonna say burnt out, but like not literally, uh, impoverished neighborhoods right beside the friggin' strip.
Is
And
it
it's
really? They're like right up next to each other?
yeah,
Such a dichotomy like that?
yeah,
I've never been to Vegas. I had no
it's pretty
idea.
nuts. Yeah, it like the
Interesting.
strip kind of diverges out in a few places, but for the most part, yeah, like you have some gated communities, and then you have horribly impoverished areas all right alongside the strip. It's
Interesting.
yeah, it's wild.
Interesting.
Yeah, Vegas,
Well, I
Vegas.
learned something new today.
Yeah, it's an interesting place. Go there if we can ever travel between cities again.
We'll see. We'll see when that happens.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because you're in America as well. It's gonna. Good luck, man.
Oh, it's it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. Save me.
Yeah, my fiance's in America.
Mm.
Yeah.
So you get it.
Oh yeah, it hurts.
You get the dumpster fire that I'm currently living in.
Yeah, it's wild.
Hmm.
20,
Anyway.
2020's been a hell of a year.
Hmm.
Anyway, yeah. So let's talk on a happier note. Stretch goals. Do you have any like really wild stuff in there?
So the first few, I like was blown away that I hit both of my stretch goals on day one. Like that was just like I didn't know what to do. So once that happened, the stretch goals were about having more art and more monsters. And so actually, the first three stretch goals are all about commissioning more art and me generating more monsters, which is fun for me because I like thinking of how you make monsters that fit in an urban setting and how you translate. How can you translate some like maybe traditional monsters that you would see in other games into an urban setting? I was talking about this earlier of this idea of like, we have this trope of dryads that protect like a glade in a forest or something like that. Like they protect a tree. But like, what is a dryad in an urban environment? Do they like really care about this one like intersection essentially? They see it as like a holy place? Like it's fun for me to try and think of the alternative ways we can take those traditional monsters. So that's one of the goals that I'm working on right now. And because those other goals were hit, I've been talking to a number of artists. So the book is going to have a lot of art in it, which is kind of most important to me, is having the book really look good. One thing I'm hesitant to do is throw in a bunch of stretch goals of me like throwing in lots of content and bloating it and inevitably causing delays and stuff like that. Like I want it to just be what it is and look really good in what it is, rather than like, oh, I've effectively doubled the size of the book, but now I've got a lot of writing to do and I probably won't hit that deadline anymore. And so, for now, my primary goal is to stick to the timeline so that people get the book when they expect the book and for it to look really nice when they get it. I do have one in my pocket. If things go well, I have a friend of mine who also has a Kickstarter coming up in August, which just looks fantastic. He and I are very similar in our mindset. His is a 2-player game about a gunslinger and the sentient gun. So one person plays the gun, the other person plays the slinger. It's very cool.
I was
I can
yeah, I was
I can
gonna
send you
say
a link and tell you all about it later. But
I was gonna
um,
say, can you put me in contact with that? But that interview's actually scheduled for next weekend.
Oh, you're gonna talk to
Yeah.
Nevin. Excellent. Perfect. Oh, good. So then, yeah. So Nevin, I might have write a hunt, or I want to get like a guest author of some kind to write a hunt because I have my own hunt, which is the equivalent of an adventure in the book. But I think leaning into that idea of everybody has their own interpretation of the setting, it would be cool to get another person's perspective on what a hunt, the investigation, the monster, all of that would look like, just because it would be different than what I think it is. And I think that would be really cool to have in the book.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want, I first off, I appreciate the restraint in not overloading it with stretch goals. I think most of us have backed a project that just got completely flooded with stretch goals, and it's 5 years later, and the only updates you get now are like, "Hey, the only part you actually wanted might be its own Kickstarter."
Mm-hmm.
Not naming names here, but still mad about it.
Yep. I know that game very well. Yeah,
uh,
especially coming from the board game space. Like the board game Kickstarters are just notorious for stretch goal bloat. So I
yeah,
wanted to try and avoid that.
yeah. I have a buddy who works at a game store, and he said that the main way he can tell if something is started as a Kickstarter product is if it just comes with like 600 expansions. They're just
Yep.
like, well, this is going on a table, and we're never selling most of it. Great.
Yep.
Uh, um. Also, if you're looking for more people to write stretch goal adventures, I can definitely send you some suggestions because it's a good one, right? Because there's not particular work on you, and it's like guaranteed pay and all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. I'd love to support more people who are writers, contributors, creators in this space. So yeah, if you've got a list, I'd love to. I'm trying to get as many people to get their voice in it or their mark on it. Just again to really lean into that idea of like this is a weirdly wild, diverse city, and so it's gonna feel kind of weird and wild and diverse in the book in terms of themes and style and stuff like that.
yeah. And on that topic, can you tell us a little bit about the monsters? Like, are these all original, or a lot of them folkloric, or?
So it's a bit of a mix right now. I think the book currently has 24 monsters in it that I've written and statted up. So there's going to be more because we hit that stretch goal. I'd say it's probably split between either kind of an existing folkloric sort of inspiration or something that either I created on my own or I've twisted so wildly that it becomes very hard to see what it was before. So like a folkloric inspiration would be like there's a troll in the game, but it's not like a traditional bridge troll because there's not a lot of I mean there could be bridges, but the idea is that it's mostly kind of like you want to pay the passage to move through alleyways and streetways rather than a bridge and stuff like that. So again, leaning into that idea of like twisting and adding that urban styling to an existing monster. So like there's that. Um, there's one of the adventures is all about taking place in sort of a district that's primarily for like a graveyard. It's like almost a citywide graveyard, and so there's a number of monsters in there that are based off of that, and that's actually where the adventure of the game takes place. And there's a boss monster in there that has a unique mechanic that basically gets more powerful each round, and it almost unlocks abilities for it to use as the thing goes on. So it's kind of like a multi-phase monster, but not in the way that Wizards of the Coast just announced theirs with their weird 3-phase,
Yes.
really tone deaf monster that they released.
What, you don't like the floating womb? You don't like
Yeah,
the primal essence of a woman being the womb?
yeah. So I'm avoiding that
Oh,
as best I can. So yeah, it's I think looking through the monster list, you will see names of monsters that are familiar to you, but will probably be new takes on them to represent the like most likely a different environment or terrain than you would normally see them in most other games that would be a monster hunting sort of setting.
right. Do you have a dual hand on a motorcycle?
I don't.
Get on that, man.
I got to write. Where's my notepad? I don't know where my notepad is.
Not
I'll
an
have to
original
remember this.
concept, blatantly stolen from the anime Durarara, which is a wonderful show if you've never seen it.
I have not.
It's real good.
Okay.
it's a like urban fantasy-ish, a little bit more slice of lifey than like monster hunting, but
Okay.
yeah, it's got a dual hand on a motorcycle, and she's
Okay.
wonderful. Yeah.
I
Um.
will I will write that down, or I'll
Yeah.
watch the YouTube and remind myself.
Sounds good. Um. Yeah. Oh yeah, and the delivery date is estimated to be October 2020, which is pretty soon. Uh,
Yeah, so I mean the book is largely written. Like I said, I've been working on it for a year on and off. So the rules that had been play tested and written for a while. It was just really kind of a matter of pulling the trigger on starting a Kickstarter for it. And so uh, I'm pretty confident in that timeline, especially because I'm avoiding adding a lot more writing for myself. So instead, it just gives us plenty of time to coordinate with all the different artists that are going to be filling it with art, and with my layout person who's going to be working on making all of this stuff actually fit in one book. So I just give myself that timeline to mostly work with freelance artists and things like that.
yeah, and not to mention the actual physical production part of it, which in these uncertain times can be quite difficult.
Yes, thankfully I've got a printer lined up who I recently did a print run of a zine with, who I've worked with them a couple times, so I'm confident in their quality and their turnaround. So I'm feeling good about that. But exactly like you said, uncertain times. So I gave myself till October to kind of turn it around.
Yeah. I do have one final question. And this comes back to weird stretch goals, but do you have any plans for like some kind of Roll20 integration uh, in the future?
That would that would be really cool. I would like to do something like that. I have absolutely no idea how to do it. So I would need to find the right people who know how to do it. But I think that would be really helpful, obviously right now, because that's primarily how most people are playing, is through some sort of digital, virtual tabletop. So I like that idea. I love that idea. In fact, it's one that I haven't honestly researched very much. So I would have to, figure out what goes into that, and find people who actually know way more about it than I do. So
Yeah.
if you know anybody, let me know, and I
Uh,
might be able to contact them and see about it.
I can talk to our other DM. I think she's a little bit overloaded with work, but I know you can definitely do exploding dice. So
Excellent.
there's that.
There's somebody who has reached out and is working on character sheets for a game that I previously released for Roll20, and so maybe I'll reach out to him and see about trying to find a way to, if it's in his schedule, to come up, because part of it is because each class plays so differently. You need 4 different sheets,
Yeah.
which is a thing that my graphic designer is dealing with. Is I told her, hey, you can't make the same character sheet. Everybody needs a different sheet because everybody has a different set of abilities and different things on the sheet. So she's going to unravel that mystery for me, thankfully. So I'm
Yeah.
looking to experts to solve these problems for me.
Yeah. So it's going to be like a 5 tab sheet, one for each of the core classes, and then one to kind of fill out. And
Yeah, exactly. Something along those lines.
yeah. And there are sections in the book on making your own classes, as far as I recall, right?
There's a lot of stuff in there in terms of how to expand on like monsters and districts and stuff like that. I don't actually have anything in the book, now that I think about it, about making your own class. But I mean, certainly, if you wanted to, you could. The idea is that you just need a new mechanic. Like each class needs a different mechanic. So you wouldn't want to make another class that's also exploding dice, because that's what the blade does. So you want to try and think of like weird ways of manipulating dice. And if you can come up with a new manipulation, you got yourself a Slayer's class right there.
I mean, or poker cards if you can figure it out.
Yeah, if you could somehow merge like poker and dominoes and dice into one game, then we've got it all covered.
Yeah, man. Give me a Tarotcaster class. I'd be in for that.
That'd be kind of cool, actually.
Yeah.
I like it.
That's the Slayers 2 Kickstarter goal right there.
Yeah, that's the expansion right there. How to
Yeah.
add cards to the game or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I think that about wraps everything up. Unless you have something else you'd like to bring up about it.
No, I think that's everything. I'm only 3 days into the campaign right now, so there's still plenty of time to go back it. Plenty of time for me to figure out what other stretch goals to add if there's going to be more stretch goals. But so far, everybody's been extremely supportive. I'm very lucky and thankful for that, and thankful for the opportunities to talk about it. So
Oh,
thank you very much.
thank you. This has been a wonderful conversation. And
Absolutely.
yeah, for everybody watching home, have a good night.
Thank you.